Hey everyone, and welcome back to Tell Me More Stories Told as podcast,
Yes, welcome back.
where we like to take these deep dives, into
Yeah.
these really interesting stories. And today we are talking about somebody who I think, a lot of people know of, Mark Wahlberg.
Oh, yeah. Fascinating story, I think.
Yeah, I mean, talk about somebody who's done it all.
I mean, when you look at his career, it's almost like looking at, several
Hmm.
different lives all kind of packed into one.
Right.
I mean, he's gone from, teenage heartthrob to this big Hollywood heavyweight,
Yeah.
all while like building businesses and giving back to his community. It's really pretty incredible.
It really is. It's almost mind-blowing when you think about it. Like, he starts out, the youngest of 9 kids
Oh, wow.
in Dorchester, Boston.
Not exactly the typical breeding ground for a superstar.
Yeah, not really a place you'd think of, like, oh yeah, that's where all the famous people are coming from,
Yeah, right.
But that upbringing definitely had a huge impact on him, I think.
Yeah, he's talked about that a lot. The challenges of, growing up in that kind of tough neighborhood
Right.
and how it really instilled in him, I think, a certain drive and resilience from a very young age.
Yeah, you can see that kind of drive. I mean, it led him to music,
Right.
first with New Kids on the Block, and he was just 13.
Think about that. 13 years old,
Yeah.
performing on stage with a group that's going to go on to become a global phenomenon. I mean,
Yeah.
that's pretty remarkable.
It is. And, even though he left New Kids on the Block pretty quickly, it clearly sparked something in him.
Yeah.
Because just a few years later, he forms his own group,
Right.
Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch.
Yeah, Marky Mark the Funky Bunch. That's where things really took off for him.
Yeah.
I mean, their hit song, Good Vibrations, topped the Billboard charts. It went platinum.
Wow.
It made Marky Mark a household name. I mean, everybody knew who he was.
And it wasn't even just the music. I mean, those Calvin Klein ads
Oh, yeah.
with Kate Moss, like shot by Herb Ritz.
Ritz, yeah. Legendary photographer.
I mean, those turned him into a full-blown
Sex symbol, yeah.
sex symbol. Yeah.
I mean, those ads were incredibly striking. They were really provocative at the time.
Yeah.
I mean, they really pushed the boundaries of what was considered, acceptable in fashion advertising.
Right.
And they helped to kind of cement Wahlberg's image as this, rebel and a heartthrob.
It's funny, though. Like, despite all that success with music and modeling,
Mm-hmm.
like the band's foray into video games.
Oh, no.
What a flop.
Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch. Make my video.
Yeah. I mean, that game,
I've heard of that.
considered one of the worst video games ever.
Oh, really?
It's infamous.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
It just goes to show, even when you have massive talent and you're super popular,
Uh-huh.
not everything you touch is going to be a hit.
Not everything you touch turns to gold, that's for sure.
Right. But speaking of not everything you touch turning to gold, this is kind of where things get a little bit more complicated with Wahlberg's story. You're talking about the controversies, right?
Exactly.
Some of the comments that he made early on in his career, particularly around, Shabba Ranks and his anti-gay statements, those generated a lot of backlash.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And those controversies, I think, really highlight the complexities of his journey.
Yeah.
You have this young guy riding high on success, but also making some pretty serious missteps.
Yeah, and it raises a lot of questions about, personal accountability and how we perceive these celebrities, especially when they're young and still trying to figure things out.
Absolutely. And those questions become even more interesting as we kind of follow his transition from music into acting.
Yeah, before we get into that, though, why don't you all go ahead and hit that subscribe button?
Yes.
So you don't miss out on the rest of Mark Wahlberg's incredible story. We'll be right back with more on Tell Me More Stories Told as podcast.
Stay tuned. Welcome back to Tell Me More Stories Told as podcast.
Picking up Mark Wahlberg's story here.
Yeah. And, he's navigating some of these early career controversies.
Right.
And looking to kind of make a move into acting.
It's a pretty remarkable transition when you think about it, going from that world of music and modeling to trying to establish yourself as a serious actor.
Oh,
I mean, that's a big leap.
Yeah, it definitely was not, an overnight success story.
Right.
I mean, his first film role was a supporting part in Renaissance Man.
Yeah, with Danny DeVito.
Yeah.
That was back in '94.
Yeah. And, while it wasn't like a huge breakout role, it gave him a chance
Yeah.
to work with some more established actors and kind of learn the ropes.
Right. Get his feet wet.
Yeah, exactly. And then he does The Basketball Diaries.
Oh, yeah.
1995.
With a young Leonardo DiCaprio.
Yeah.
I mean, come on.
That's pretty cool.
That's a pretty big deal. I think that started to turn some heads You know, it showed a different side of him, you know, a little bit of raw intensity that went beyond the whole Marky Mark persona.
Right.
He wasn't just a pretty face,
Yeah.
you know? This guy could act.
Yeah, and then you really see that intensity on full display in his first starring role
Uh-huh.
in the thriller Fear.
Oh, yeah, that was a great movie.
I
He
mean,
played that obsessive and menacing boyfriend.
yeah, a little bit creepy.
It was really creepy, a complete departure from his image, you know, and it made people kind of sit up and take notice and think, okay, this guy's serious about this acting thing.
Yeah, for sure. But the real turning point, I think, in his career came in 1997.
Yeah, what was that?
Boogie Nights.
Boogie Nights, that's the one. His portrayal of Dirk Diggler,
Oh my gosh.
a young man navigating the ups and downs of the 70s porn industry. I mean, that was just a revelation.
It really was.
It earned him critical acclaim. I mean, that's the movie that put him on the map.
Yeah, and it's kind of amazing to think that he almost turned that role down.
Really?
Yeah, he was initially hesitant because of the subject matter, you know, and some of the explicit scenes.
Yeah, I can see that.
But the director, Paul Thomas Anderson, really believed in him and kind of convinced him to take a leap.
Well, thank goodness he did.
I know. I can't imagine anybody else as Dirk Diggler.
Right. He owned that role. It's hard to imagine anyone else doing it.
It was a risk that definitely paid off in a big way.
It really did. Showed his range, his willingness to push boundaries, you know, take on challenging roles.
Totally. And it's interesting to think about the roles that he chose after that, like The Perfect Storm,
Oh, yeah.
Planet of the Apes, The Italian Job.
Blockbusters.
Yeah.
Big budget Hollywood movies.
And, you know, he could have easily just stayed in that indie film world.
Right. He could have kept doing those smaller movies.
But he made this really conscious decision to try his hand at these big budget action films.
And some people might have seen that as a step back, you know?
Yeah, like selling out a little bit.
Right. But I think it speaks to his desire to really challenge himself and not be pigeonholed into one type of role or genre. He wanted to prove that he could handle, you know, different genres and appeal to a wider audience.
And, you know, he did a pretty good job of it. I mean, those movies were all box office successes.
Huge successes. Yeah.
And they allowed him to work with some of the biggest names in Hollywood.
I mean, yeah, you're talking George Clooney, Mark Wahlberg, Charlize Theron. I mean, the list goes on and on.
But even with all that action hero stuff, he never totally abandoned, I think, his more dramatic roots.
Right?
You know, his performance in The Departed in 2006 was incredible.
Yeah. The Martin Scorsese film.
Yeah.
Where he played that tough-talking undercover cop.
Yeah.
I mean, that role earned him an Academy Award nomination.
For Best Supporting Act.
Best Supporting Actor. That's a huge moment in his career.
That's huge.
It really solidified his status as this, you know, well-respected actor and showed that he could hold his own alongside some of the best in the business.
And I think it opened up even more opportunities for him after that. I mean,
Right.
he went on to star in films like Invincible, Shooter, The Fighter.
Yeah, showcasing his ability to really take on these diverse roles.
Yeah. And what's so striking, I think, is how he just seems to genuinely enjoy taking on new challenges.
Yeah.
And, you know, surprising audiences.
He doesn't want to be put in a box.
No.
He's not content to just rest on his laurels.
Absolutely. And beyond acting, he's
Right.
built a whole empire. I mean,
You're talking about his business ventures.
yeah.
Wahlburgers.
Yeah.
The restaurant chain that he owns with his brothers.
Yeah, they even have a reality show.
They have a reality show about it. It's pretty wild.
It's kind of crazy.
To think about how he's managed to juggle this successful acting career, building these businesses, and even finding time for philanthropy. I mean,
Yeah.
the guy's got an incredible work ethic.
He's got that drive.
It permeates everything he does. It's clear that he's passionate about giving back,
Yeah.
especially, you know, through the Mark Wahlberg Youth Foundation.
It really is inspiring to see someone who's achieved so much,
Yeah.
you know, still committed to making a difference.
Absolutely. Before we wrap up this part, though, I got to ask you, what do you think it is about Mark Wahlberg that really resonates with so many people?
You know, I think there's something really relatable about his journey. He's faced challenges, he's had his setbacks, but he's always striving to improve himself and to learn from his past.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he doesn't shy away from his mistakes, and he's always pushing himself to grow and to be better.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think there's a certain authenticity to him that people connect with, you know?
Yeah.
He's not afraid to kind of be vulnerable and show his flaws.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that makes him all the more, you know, human and relatable.
For sure. Stay tuned for the final part of Mark Wahlberg's story on Tell Me More Stories Told as Podcast. Welcome back to Tell Me More Stories Told, his podcast.
Wrapping up our exploration of Mark Wahlberg.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about his career, the highs and lows,
Yeah.
the controversies and the triumphs.
Yeah.
But, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on kind of like the man behind the persona,
Yeah. It's an important thing to consider, isn't it? Beyond the fame and fortune.
Right.
Who is Mark Wahlberg, at his core?
Exactly. He's a devoted family man. I mean, he's been married to Rhea Durham since 2009, and they have 4 children together.
Yeah, and he seems to prioritize his family above all else.
Yeah.
He's talked about, the importance of faith and family in his life and how they really provide, a sense of grounding and stability
Yeah.
amidst the chaos of Hollywood,
Absolutely. It's so refreshing to see that, especially in an industry that can be so demanding and, often puts immense pressure on personal relationships.
Totally, and it really speaks to his values, I mean, it seems that despite all the trappings of fame, he's managed to create a really loving and supportive family environment.
Yeah, absolutely. And it makes you wonder, if those early experiences, the challenges that he faced growing up, played a role in shaping his priorities as an adult.
I think that's definitely a possibility. Maybe those experiences instilled in him, a deep appreciation for the importance of family and a desire to create a different life for his own children,
Yeah, it's so interesting, too, to think about how his past has really shaped his philanthropic work.
Right?
He's so involved with the Mark Wahlberg Youth Foundation, which provides support and opportunities for underprivileged youth.
Yeah, there's this clear sense of, wanting to give back to help kids who might be facing similar struggles that he did. It's like he's trying to break the cycle and provide a path forward for others.
Yeah, which is so commendable.
Absolutely.
It speaks to a certain level of self-awareness, a recognition of the challenges that he's faced, and a desire to really use his platform
Yeah.
to make a positive impact.
It adds another layer to his story, right? This whole idea of redemption, acknowledging past mistakes and, striving to become a better version of yourself.
As we wrap up this deep dive, what are your final thoughts on Mark Wahlberg?
I think he's really a complex and multifaceted individual. He's hard to categorize. He's a talented actor,
Yeah.
a smart businessman, a devoted family man, and, someone who's clearly committed to personal growth and giving back to his community.
And, his journey has been anything but straightforward.
Right.
He's made mistakes, he's faced controversies, but he's always strived to learn from those experiences and emerge stronger.
There's a certain resilience to him,
Yeah.
a refusal to be defined by his past. And I think that's ultimately what makes his story so compelling. It's a reminder that we all have the capacity for growth and change, no matter where we come from or what we've been through.
Well said. Well said.
Yeah.
It's been such a pleasure unpacking this incredible journey with you.
The pleasure was all mine. And to our listeners, thank you all so much for joining us on this deep dive into the life and career of Mark Wahlberg. We hope you all found it as fascinating as we did.
Absolutely. And if you're looking for more captivating stories, be sure to subscribe to Tell Me More Stories Told, his podcast.
Yeah.
We'll be back soon with another deep dive into the lives of some really extraordinary people.
Until then, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep telling your own stories.